John Miller, a father of 3, was going through a tough time. He had recently separated from his wife, turning his life upside down. The house felt emptier, and the responsibility of taking care of his children now rested entirely on him. Bills were piling up, and John knew he urgently needed to find a new job to ensure his children lacked nothing. After several weeks of relentless searching, he secured an opportunity as a caregiver for an elderly and ill woman named Evelyn Harper. John took the job, fully aware that it wouldn't be easy. On the first day, he arrived at Evelyn's home, an old mansion that, despite its grandeur, had an air of neglect. Evelyn Harper was a frail-looking woman with thin white hair and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through John. However, her physical frailty did not match her behavior. Evelyn was often grumpy and made no secret of her displeasure with John's presence. She grumbled about almost everything, from the food to the timing of her medication, and even the way John organized her belongings. In the early days, John faced many challenges. Evelyn constantly tested him, whether by ignoring his attempts to help her or making cutting remarks about his ability to care for her. There were moments when John felt discouraged and even thought about quitting, but each time he looked at the photo of his children, he found the strength to keep going. He knew he needed that job, not just for the money, but also to prove to himself and his children that he could overcome any obstacle. So, even when Evelyn was abusive, John responded with patience and kindness. He tried to understand what lay behind her bitterness. Over time, he began to notice small details, like the way Evelyn's eyes lit up when she talked about the past or the slight softness in her voice when she mentioned her late husband. John started to use this information to his advantage. On days when Evelyn was particularly difficult, he would distract her by telling stories about his children or asking about her youth. Slowly, a tenuous connection began to form. Evelyn was still demanding and often harsh, but John noticed small changes in her behavior. She was beginning to trust him, albeit reluctantly. The nights were the hardest for John. After a long day of work, he would return home exhausted but still had to care for his children, help with homework, and prepare dinner. However, he refused to show any sign of weakness in front of them. Every smile, every laugh from his children was a reward for his efforts. John knew that despite all the hardships, he was doing his best to ensure his children had a better future. And even though Evelyn didn't openly show it, he felt that his work was beginning to make a difference in her life too. Every day, John faced Evelyn's hostility. From the moment he arrived, the elderly woman made sure to express her dissatisfaction with everything around her. It was a constant challenge to deal with the severe criticism and verbal attacks she unleashed without hesitation. One morning, while John was preparing breakfast, Evelyn approached him with a scowl. "Do you really think this is the right way to make coffee? It's weak and tasteless," she snapped, looking at the cup with disdain. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper. I'll make a new one and try to make it stronger," John responded calmly as he discarded the drink and started preparing another. On another day, Evelyn was sitting in her favorite chair, wrapped in a blanket. John entered to adjust the air conditioning and heard Evelyn grumble. "Can't you tell the room is always cold? You never bother to set the air conditioning correctly." "I understand, Mrs. Harper. I'll check the air conditioning and see if I can adjust the temperature better for you," John said, going to the panel with his usual patience. The verbal attacks were frequent and often unexpected. One day, John was helping Evelyn dress for the day. He was trying to drape a blouse over her shoulders when she abruptly interrupted him. "You have no idea how to treat a lady, do you? Look at this blouse. It seems like you're trying to tear it." "I apologize if I'm being clumsy, Mrs. Harper. I'm trying to be as gentle as possible," John replied, carefully adjusting the blouse while trying not to show the frustration he felt. Evelyn didn't limit her criticism to household tasks. Sometimes, her attacks were personal. "I don't know why you're here. There must be someone more qualified to take care of me," she once said while John was cleaning the living room floor. John took a deep breath and calmly replied, "I understand that you may be frustrated, Mrs. Harper. I'm here to help with whatever you need, and I'll do my best to meet your needs." Even when Evelyn raised her voice, John remained calm. One afternoon, while he was preparing a snack, Evelyn criticized the type of food he was serving. "Once again, you choose something I don't like. Don't you know what's good for someone my age? I'll do my best to find something you like more. If you have any suggestions, please let me know," John said as he started preparing a new option. Despite all the criticism and attacks, John continued to care for Evelyn's needs with patience and respect. He knew that behind the hostility was a person dealing with her own frustrations and fears. For that reason, he strove to maintain dignity and respect in every interaction, even when it seemed like a constant challenge. During one of his daily cleaning routines at Evelyn's house, John was organizing a stack of documents and papers that had accumulated in an old drawer. Carefully, he sifted through the sheets, trying to find something important or useful, when he noticed an old photograph hidden among the papers. The photograph was in black and white, depicting a classic-looking musical group. At the center of the image, a young, well-dressed woman was seated at a piano, her delicate hands touching the keys with a serenity that revealed the deep love she felt for the music. Her eyes were slightly closed, as if she were lost in the melody she was creating, and there was a soft smile on her lips, suggesting the profound connection she had with that art. The expression on her face conveyed an unwavering passion, a silent devotion to the music that seemed to transcend time. John was deeply intrigued by the image. The woman in the photo exuded an aura of grace and talent, and he felt a growing curiosity about who she was and what the story was behind that intimate and expressive scene. Not quite sure what to do, John decided to take the photo to Evelyn. He approached the room where she was sitting in her favorite armchair, her eyes fixed on some distant point, as if lost in thought. "Mrs. Harper," he began hesitantly, "I found this photo while cleaning out the drawer. It was among some old documents. Do you know this woman?" Evelyn looked at the photo with a flicker of surprise. Upon seeing the image, her face instantly hardened. "Where did you find this?" she asked, trying to hide the discomfort that seemed to well up from somewhere deep within. "It was hidden among some old papers in your desk drawer. It's an old photo of a musical group, and the woman in the photo, she seems to be someone very special," John explained, still filled with curiosity. Evelyn took the photo with a closed expression, her eyes scanning the image for a brief moment, as if she were reliving a long-forgotten memory. "This is none of your concern, John. Just put it back where you found it," she replied, trying to disguise the emotion that threatened to seep into her voice. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harper. I just thought it was interesting. If you prefer, I can store the photo somewhere else," John offered, noticing the change in Evelyn's expression and the tension that now filled the room. "I said it's none of your business," Evelyn insisted, handing the photo back to John with a coldness that contrasted with the warmth of the memory the image seemed to bring. "Just get on with your work and don't meddle in things that don't concern you." John realized that Evelyn was clearly disturbed by the photo and decided not to push the issue. He returned to his cleaning task, but the image of the young woman at the piano continued to linger in his mind. Who was she? And why did Evelyn, who always maintained such an impenetrable facade, seem so shaken by seeing her? While cleaning Evelyn's living room, John noticed a large object covered by a sheet in the corner of the room. Curious, he pulled the sheet back and revealed an old piano, its shine dulled by time and dust. The piano was in a state of neglect, but John could still see that it was a beautiful instrument. As he passed by the piano, John began to hear Evelyn sighing and murmuring softly. At first, the sounds were unintelligible, but as he got closer, he could make out a few words. "Ah, those days. If only I could go back in time." The atmosphere in the room felt heavy with a sense of melancholic nostalgia. John noticed that Evelyn was sitting in her armchair, with a distant and sorrowful look in her eyes. Her murmurs revealed a deep pain and a longing for the past. With the weight of the situation pressing on him, John felt an urgent need to find a way to ease the tension that was building up. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at the piano, and then decided to try playing a few notes. With some hesitation, John approached the piano and lifted the lid over the keys. The wood was cold to the touch, and the sound of the keys was a bit out of tune, but it was still music. He began to play a few loose notes, trying to find a gentle melody that might bring some comfort. Evelyn, hearing the first chords, raised her head and looked at John with surprise. "You know how to play the piano?" she asked, her voice revealing a tone of curiosity mixed with a hint of emotion. "Not very well, but I thought I might try to play something to help lighten the heavy mood," John replied as he continued to play a simple melody that seemed to float in the air. The piano produced a series of uneven and slightly off-key notes, but John was determined to create something that could convey a sense of calm. He played a small piece of music he had learned when he was younger, a tune that had always brought him a bit of peace. Evelyn watched in silence, her gaze fixed on the piano as John played. The murmur she had been making earlier subsided, and she seemed to absorb each note with a kind of silent gratitude. "I used to play a lot. It was such an important part of my life," Evelyn said, her voice almost a whisper. "I haven't played in years. It was something that made me feel alive." John continued playing with more confidence, moved by the feeling that he was providing a moment of relief and connection for Evelyn. The simple melody seemed to fill the room with a new energy, softening the tension that had previously lingered in the air. John began to notice something interesting. Every time he played the piano, Evelyn seemed to calm down. It was as if the music awakened dormant memories and, for a brief moment, brought a smile to her face. He observed that her eyes, usually burdened with sadness, started to sparkle with a glimmer of recollection. Sensing that he had found a way to ease some of the tension between them, John decided to play the piano more frequently. He chose quiet moments, when the atmosphere was calm and the house was silent. Each time he sat at the piano, he played a gentle melody, hoping the music would lift Evelyn's spirits and, at the same time, create a friendlier connection between them. During these musical sessions, Evelyn began to talk more, slowly revealing pieces of her life that had previously remained hidden. "When I was young, I used to play in small performances with a local group, she said one afternoon as John played a classic melody. I remember the afternoon spent rehearsing and the smiles of my friends. She continued to speak about these moments with a lightness that was rare in her daily conversations. I also used to frequent a cafe where musicians gathered. It was a place full of life, full of stories and music. It was there that I met my husband. John listened attentively, respecting the pace of Evelyn's revelations. She seemed more relaxed, and her voice carried a tone of nostalgia that he hadn't heard before. Despite these small stories, Evelyn was still reserved about many aspects of her life, avoiding deep details or issues that seemed too personal. As the music filled the room, John noticed that Evelyn's conversations became a bit more frequent and that she seemed less rigid in her interactions with him. The stories she shared were like fragments of a puzzle that John was beginning to piece together, revealing a rich and complex life behind the reserved facade of her personality. The music became a bond between them, a silent bridge that helped soften the edges of their daily interactions and encouraged Evelyn to open up a little more, though she still maintained some distance regarding more intimate details. As John played, the room seemed to fill not just with music, but with the memories Evelyn was unearthing. She continued speaking, her voice carrying a mix of longing and acceptance. There was one particular night, Evelyn began, her eyes shining as she recalled. It was a winter ball at the music hall. Everything was lit by candles, and snow was falling outside. The atmosphere was magical. I was wearing a light blue dress, and my father told me I looked like a princess. John kept playing softly, choosing a melody that matched the scene Evelyn was describing. It was that night that the young violinist asked me to dance, she continued, a wistful smile forming on her lips. The music he played for me was so beautiful, so full of emotion. We danced together, and in that moment, I thought nothing could be more perfect. Evelyn paused, as if reliving every detail of that night. It was also that night he told me he was leaving to study music in another city. I was devastated, but I also knew it was the right thing for him. He had a talent that needed to be nurtured. John watched Evelyn, noticing the sadness in her eyes as she spoke. He continued playing, allowing the music to support her words, creating a space where memories could flow freely. I never saw him again, Evelyn said, her voice softening. But whenever I hear this piece by Chopin, I remember that night, that dance, and the feeling of young love I never forgot. John felt deep empathy for Evelyn. The music he was playing had become a bridge to these long-buried memories, and he knew he was helping her process parts of her life she might have tried to forget. I think music has that power, John said gently, his hand still gliding over the keys. It connects us to moments that are important, to people who marked our lives, and to feelings that never really fade. Evelyn nodded, her eyes still lost in memories. Yes, music is one of the few things that can take us back in time, to a place where we were truly happy. From that moment on, Evelyn and John began to have more of these conversations while he played the piano. The music was the thread that wove together the fragments of Evelyn's life, allowing her to share stories that might otherwise have remained buried. Each session at the piano became more than just music. It was a journey through memories, an act of healing, and a way for Evelyn to reconnect with parts of herself that had been lost. For John, these sessions became a path to truly know Evelyn, the woman behind the reserved exterior, and to form a bond he never expected to develop. On a rainy afternoon, the sound of raindrops tapping against the windows of Evelyn's house created a tranquil and introspective atmosphere. John sat at the piano, playing soft melodies to calm the environment. The steady rhythm of the rain blended with the music, creating a serene ambience. Evelyn was seated in her armchair near the fireplace, watching John with a distant look in her eyes. Suddenly she stirred and said, "John, there's a piece I would love for you to play. It was one of my favorites when I was young. It's called Clair de Lune." John raised an eyebrow, surprised by the choice. "Of course, Mrs. Hopper. I'll play it for you," he replied, adjusting himself on the piano bench and beginning to play Debussy's familiar notes. The piece, with its soft and melancholic tones, filled the room with a sense of calm and nostalgia. As John played, Evelyn closed her eyes, allowing herself to be enveloped by the music. The atmosphere seemed to shift, and John could see that Evelyn was deeply immersed in her memories. Her face, usually marked by seriousness, began to show signs of emotion. When John reached the climax of the piece, Evelyn could no longer hold back her tears. They began to stream down her face, and she covered herself with a handkerchief, trying to hide her crying. Seeing her reaction, John stopped playing and approached her. "Are you all right, Mrs. Harper?" John asked, his voice filled with concern. Evelyn looked at him with red, tear-filled eyes. "I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," she said, her voice breaking. "This music, it reminds me of very difficult times. If you'd like to talk about it, I'm here to listen," John offered gently. Evelyn took a deep breath, as if preparing to share something deeply personal. I used to be a very talented pianist. When I was young, I had big dreams of pursuing a career in music. I played in concerts, and people always praised my talent. She paused, the tears continuing to fall. But then, something terrible happened. My father, who was my biggest supporter, passed away unexpectedly. Losing him was a devastating blow, and I couldn't find the strength to continue my career. The music that used to be my passion became a source of pain. I stopped playing and set aside my dreams. John listened intently, absorbing every word. I'm so sorry for your loss, Evelyn. That must have been incredibly hard for you. Evelyn nodded slowly, trying to compose herself. Yes, it was. And even now, when I hear that music, I feel like I'm reliving that period of my life. But it's also a way to remember what I loved and what could have been. John returned to the piano and began to play again, but this time with more sensitivity, aware of the weight of the emotions Evelyn was sharing. The environment, marked by the rain and the music, seemed to wrap them both in a moment of deep connection and understanding. As John spent more time with Evelyn, he found himself increasingly intrigued by the story she shared about her youth as a pianist. The sadness she expressed when talking about her interrupted career sparked a desire in John to understand more deeply what had happened. On a rainy night, while Evelyn was resting, John took the opportunity to investigate. He began searching for information about Evelyn Harper online. After some searching, he found an old article about a renowned pianist named Evelyn Harper who had been praised at various concerts and musical events. The article discussed her brilliant career and the promises she had for the future, but it also mentioned a tragic car accident that had changed everything. John read carefully, discovering that the accident occurred several decades ago and resulted in the loss of her musical partner, a violinist named Arthur Collins. Additionally, the accident had caused serious health issues for Evelyn, forcing her to step away from the stage and abandon her musical career. Determined to learn more about the accident and the people involved, John began searching for old news records, hoping to find more details. In a thorough search, he found a newspaper article that reported on the accident with information about the location and date. The report described the accident as a head-on collision on a rural road, resulting in Arthur's instant death and serious injuries to Evelyn. The article also mentioned the impact the tragedy had on Evelyn's life, highlighting how Arthur's loss and the need for physical recovery removed her from the spotlight and her promising career. The article included statements from friends and colleagues lamenting the loss and expressing their admiration for Evelyn's strength in facing adversity. Moved by the new understanding of Evelyn's pain and sacrifice, John decided to seek more information about the accident and about Arthur Collins. He found some old records about the violinist, including mentions of his exceptional skill and his contribution to music. These records helped John understand the importance of Arthur in Evelyn's life and career. John also reached out to music experts and local historians, hoping to gain more details about the impact of the accident on Evelyn's life and about Arthur Collins' legacy. He was determined to gather as much information as possible, not only to better understand Evelyn's past but also to find ways to help her regain some of the joy that music had once brought into her life before the tragedy. As John delved deeper into the accident that had interrupted Evelyn's career, he began to uncover information that did not fit the narrative of a mere car accident. The first clue emerged when he discovered that the accident had occurred on a dangerous curve on a rural road, a location known to be unsuitable for high speeds, but where there were suddenly no records of similar incidents before that date. He intensified his research and found old documents indicating that Evelyn's car had been found with signs of sudden braking before the collision, suggesting that the driver had tried to avoid something. John also found witness statements that mentioned an oil slick on the road, which could have caused the vehicle to slide. Intrigued, John began to look into possible suspects and discovered a series of disturbing details. In a more thorough search, he found a mention of a rival of Evelyn in the music scene at the time, a pianist named Victor Langley, who had a questionable reputation and was involved in several disputes over copyrights and prestige in the musical world. The connection between Langley and Evelyn's accident was not clear, but his behavior at the time, which included veiled threats and a hostile attitude, raised suspicions. John also found news about a scandal involving Langley and an attempt to discredit other musicians, which heightened his suspicion that he might have had some involvement. When John confronted Evelyn with his findings, she reacted with a mix of shock and fear. "Are you saying this was intentional? That someone tried to harm me?" Evelyn asked, her voice trembling. John nodded. "I found evidence suggesting that the accident might not have been just an accident. There may have been an attempt at sabotage. I'm trying to uncover more about this." Evelyn's face turned pale, and she gripped the edge of her armchair as if needing support to stay upright. "I can't believe it," she murmured. "Why would someone do this? What did I do to deserve this?" John tried to comfort Evelyn, understanding that the news was deeply unsettling for her. "I know it's hard to accept. I will continue the investigation to uncover the truth. If someone is behind this, we will find that person." Evelyn huddled in her armchair, appearing tormented by a mix of terror and guilt. I don't know what to do with this. If this is true, it means that all my pain and suffering were not just the result of an accident. It means someone wanted to see me suffer. John committed to pursuing the investigation, determined to uncover the truth behind the accident and seek justice for Evelyn. He knew that facing the reality of the situation could be painful, but he believed that understanding the past could help Evelyn find some form of closure. John was determined to uncover the truth behind Evelyn's accident, and his investigation led him to an even more disturbing discovery. As he dug deeper, he found signs of a vast network of corruption seemingly linked to the accident. This network included influential and powerful individuals, and its connection to the case appeared both complex and alarming. During his investigation, John discovered that several prominent figures, who initially seemed unrelated to the accident, were involved in a web of manipulation and hidden interests. He came across old documents revealing that the road where the accident occurred had been recently renovated, but inadequately and with substandard materials. Additionally, there were records showing that the renovation had been contracted to a company with suspicious connections. John decided to investigate the company responsible for the roadwork. By accessing financial records and contracts, he found evidence of bribery and manipulation. Companies and individuals linked to the road renovation had made generous donations to local politicians and received favorable contracts in return. These findings suggested that the renovation might have been a facade to create a hazardous situation on the road where Evelyn's accident happened. Over time, John began to realize that some of the names involved were also connected to a campaign to silence Evelyn. He uncovered evidence that, after the accident, there had been a systematic effort to discredit Evelyn and suppress any mention of the accident. Newspaper articles that once covered Evelyn's career with enthusiasm began to disappear, and the few that remained were quickly refuted or downplayed. The corruption network appeared to be more extensive than John initially imagined. Influential people, including lawyers, politicians and businessmen, were seemingly involved in a conspiracy to ruin Evelyn's career and hide the truth about the accident. John faced numerous challenges while trying to gather evidence. His research was constantly obstructed by threats and attempts at intimidation. At a critical moment, John received an anonymous phone call warning him to stop his investigation. "You're meddling with something you don't understand, John. You'd better stay out of it," the voice on the phone whispered, full of menace. Despite the growing fear, John remained resolute. He knew he needed to gather enough evidence to expose the truth and hold those responsible accountable. His quest led him to investigate hidden documents, interview witnesses who were afraid to speak, and confront unexpected dangers. As John delved deeper into the investigation, the threats and obstacles became more frequent and intense. But his determination to reveal the truth and seek justice for Evelyn continued to guide him, despite the risks and challenges he faced. He was increasingly aware that he was up against a powerful and corrupt network, but his conviction to uncover the truth remained unwavering. After weeks of investigation, John finally managed to gather concrete evidence about the accident that changed Evelyn's life. He knew it was time to reveal the truth to her, a task that would not be easy but was necessary for Evelyn to find some relief. On a peaceful afternoon, with sunlight filtering through the living room curtains, John approached Evelyn. She was seated in her usual armchair, gazing at an old photograph of her musical partner, Arthur Collins. John sat beside her, his expression serious. "Evelyn," he began, his voice filled with compassion, "I've uncovered what really happened that day. It wasn't a simple accident. There was a conspiracy against you and Arthur." Evelyn lifted her eyes, her gaze a mix of skepticism and hope. What are you saying, John?" "I found evidence that the road where the accident occurred was sabotaged," John explained, showing Evelyn a folder filled with documents and reports. The company responsible for the roadwork had connections with influential people involved in corruption. "And the accident was a result of that sabotage." Evelyn looked at the papers with a mix of disbelief and sadness. "But how could this happen? Why would they do something like this?" John placed an old photograph on the coffee table. It was an image of Evelyn and Arthur, beaming on stage, surrounded by an enthusiastic audience. "I also discovered that powerful people wanted to destroy your career and Arthur's. They were concerned about the influence you had in music and tried to eliminate the competition. The road renovation and the accident were planned to look like a common accident." Tears began to roll down Evelyn's face as she tried to process John's words. "I've always wondered if there was something more behind the accident. If I had done something differently. But I never imagined it was a conspiracy." John gently touched Evelyn's arm. "It wasn't your fault, Evelyn. None of this was your fault. You and Arthur were victims of something much larger and more cruel. Now that we know the truth, we can start seeking justice." Evelyn pressed her lips together, trying to control her sobs. "Does this mean that the truth is finally coming to light?" "Yes," John confirmed. "I'm working to expose everyone involved and ensure they are held accountable. Your story needs to be known, and the truth needs to be revealed." Evelyn looked at John with an expression of gratitude mixed with relief. Thank you, John, for all your effort and for helping me understand what really happened. It's good to know I'm not alone in this. John smiled gently, feeling a deep empathy for Evelyn. You're not alone, Evelyn. We're in this together, and we'll fight for justice. As Evelyn processed the new reality, a sense of relief began to form. She finally understood that the burden of guilt she carried was not hers but rather the result of a cruel and unjust conspiracy. With John's help, she began to see a path toward the truth and justice that once seemed unreachable. On a calm and silent evening, Evelyn approached John with a special request. The soft light of the living room created a cozy atmosphere as she settled into her favorite armchair, a thoughtful expression on her face. John, she began with a trembling, quiet voice, there's one last piece I'd like you to play. It was the last one I wrote before the accident. It means a lot to me. John nodded, understanding the emotional significance of the request. He moved to the piano, covered in a fine layer of dust, and began adjusting the bench. Evelyn watched intently, her eyes shining with a mix of nostalgia and anticipation. Of course, Evelyn. I'll play it now, John said, his voice full of respect and understanding. He adjusted his posture and started playing the soft, melancholic notes, filling the room with a moving melody. As John played, Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her eyes closing as the music enveloped her. She seemed to be in a distant place, reliving memories from the past. After a few minutes, with the music still echoing in the room, Evelyn turned to John. The old photograph you found was from a special recording we made with Arthur. It was a very significant moment for us. But there's something else you need to know. John looked at Evelyn with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. What is it, Evelyn? Evelyn took a deep breath before continuing. Arthur, my musical partner, was actually your biological father. John stopped playing for a moment, stunned, and looked at Evelyn with disbelief. What, my father? Are you saying that? Yes, Evelyn confirmed, with a serious expression. Arthur was your father. We never had the chance to tell anyone, especially not you. The music you're playing is one of the last connections we had together, a reminder of what we shared. John felt a wave of conflicting emotions. He was overwhelmed by the deep and unexpected connection between him and Evelyn. The pieces of his life story began to fit together in a surprising way. I didn't know. I never imagined there was such a deep connection between us, John said, his voice choked. I always knew something was missing, but I never thought it had to do with you and my father. Evelyn smiled sadly, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. I also felt there was a connection, but I never imagined it would be like this. Music has always been the thread that bound us. Now that you know, perhaps we can find a new beginning. John looked at Evelyn, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. It's incredible to think that music brought us back together. Maybe now that we know the truth, we can start healing and move forward. The music continued softly on the piano, and the two sat in silence, reflecting on the revelation and the new perspective on their lives. The unexpected discovery brought a sense of closure and future possibilities, and both felt a bit lighter, with a new understanding and connection between them. If this story touched you, inspired you, and warmed your heart, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. If you're someone who spreads love and good things, share the story with those you think deserve to hear it and be transformed by it. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next video.